Well, hi everyone. Welcome to another installment of our Future of Real Estate series, where we bring you really inspiring, dynamic leaders in the industry. I'm here today with Eddie Berenbaum, who is the founder and president, I believe, of Century
Yeah.
21 Redwood Realty. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. And my ego really appreciates a future of real estate podcast. It's just my
Yeah,
thing.
you're gonna give us all the roadmap, all the tips
I
and tricks,
know what it
all the what
is.
to do.
That's why I'm here. You invited the right guy.
Awesome. I'm so excited. So maybe let's start from the beginning, if you
hmm
don't mind, though. Tell us, you've been in real estate your whole career, right? So how did
That's
you
it. My whole adult career. I spent a little too much more time than most people would have suggested in college, but once I was done with college, I went right into real estate. So graduated high school '92. That put me on track for '96. I left Penn State University as a super duper senior and finished that up in December of 1997. Funny stat, my sister, 2 years younger to the day, um, her and I graduated at the same exact moment. She was a semester early. I was three semesters late, but we share that graduation date and our birthday. So
Wow.
as soon as I graduated Penn State, about a month before graduating Penn State, a good friend of mine, who's now my business partner, Sean Military, called me on the phone and said, "Hey, what are you doing after graduation?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know." I said, "I don't want to pick a place to live just because of a job." No, I said, "I don't." Yeah, that's how it works. I said, "I don't want to pick a place to live because of a job. I want to move where I want to live, and then find a job on the ground." And he says, "Okay, I don't know what that means." He said, "But this company I'm working for is really good. I'm selling new homes. It's a lot of fun, and I'm making a lot of money, and I think you'd be great at it." And I said, "What's a lot of money?" And then he kind of gave me some figures, and I said, "Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll do an interview." So I came down to Northern Virginia, and I met with Sean's employer, Richmond American Homes, and I figured, and I immediately fell in love. I was like, "This is what I want to do." And I met, just for good measure, met with Toll Brothers as well, and I got job offers from both of them. Difference was Toll Brothers wanted to train me for 6 months, and God bless them, Richmond American says, "Yeah, here's the keys, sell some houses." So I went to Richmond American, and Sean and I were immediately that year. We were the number one, number two salespeople. So that would have been the '98 year. Then I went into management, and then back into sales because management was a lot of stress. Great experience, but a lot of stress. And just fast forward all the way to 2002, Sean and I, and in the meantime, that management stint that I talked to you about, my first hire was my another good friend from my childhood home in Pittsburgh, Nick Pasquini. So the three of us had been working together, and what really drove us to want to open a brokerage, go from being a builder rep to general brokerage, was the idea of buyer representation. So the thing with the builder was great because they build these beautiful models and they do all this advertising and they drive people, and then all you have to do is sell them houses. So you just have to. It's a great kind of raw sales environment because they come in looking for a home, and you find all their needs, and you have to match those needs just in maybe the 5 to 10 lots that you have available at a given time.
Mm.
Um, we would think to ourselves, sometimes it was kind of a stretch. Our neighborhood might not actually be the best place for the consumer, but it's all we had to sell. And so you were kind of forcing that non-fit just to get a sale. So we would kind of daydream like, wow, wouldn't it be great? Like this person would be great in this town, in this neighborhood, but we can't take them there. And then it's really the representation is what did it. Our relationship was with the consumer, but from a representation perspective, we're representing the builder, and that got really old because sometimes, even though Rich American Good Builder had, sometimes we would want to take the consumer side, but then we had to kind of turn on our friends and deliver news. We'd think, wouldn't it be great if we were representing the buyers and we could kind of help them navigate through these situations. So November 2002, we started Redwood Realty. It was just me on day one. I had Sean and Nick's money. Thank heavens, we each invested $20,000, which was pretty much all I had at the time, into Redwood, and then and we grew it from there. It was just me until we had enough business for two of us. We had that in the summer of 2003. That's when Sean joined, and then Nick joined us in November 2003, and we've been growing ever since. In 2006, we bought a Century 21 franchise, and that enabled us to open two offices, one in Ashburn, Virginia, which is now our corporate office, and then another in Arlington, Virginia. 2 years later, we added DC, and now we're at 13, 13 offices. We have a couple smaller satellites, so probably total 15, 16, total of about 600 agents. We're number 3 last year within the Century 21 system, which we think is pretty cool. And it's been a fun ride.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that success. And
Thank you. Thank you.
almost 20 years being around. It doesn't,
How about
you don't,
that?
you don't seem old enough.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But it's scary. It doesn't, certainly I've got 20 years worth of memories, but when you put it in those terms that we've been doing this for almost 20 years, that's freaky. So
Yeah. Well, and so tell me, I love the story about sort of wanting to really represent the buyer's best interests and sort of really, having that be what precipitated the move to independence
yeah.
and to starting your own company. And so, what now with obviously during, a pandemic and having to really change your business, what are you seeing, how has the user experience changed this year, and what do you see as like the core pillars of a great user experience today for buyers or sellers or your agents?
Yeah. So so let's talk about kind of who our customers are, right? So in brokerage, and it took us years to figure this out, right? Because a brokerage, you could argue, has two clients. That we have the consumers, the good people that buy and sell houses and make everything we do possible, and we also have the agents. So we say we have two sets of customers, and then, but it really became hard to align our corporate values when we thought we had two sets of customers. The reality is we have one customer, and our customer is the agents, and the agents have customers who are the buyers and sellers. So our direct clients are our agents, and we work hard, and everything we do is to align and enable our agents to better serve their customers. So even though we did about 4,200 transactions last year, about 800 of them came through our lead generation. So even when we meet a consumer online or through one of our relocation or affinity relationships, even when we meet that client and we say, hey, we've got the perfect agent for you, meet agent X who specializes in this neighborhood, even in that instance, the customer is really belongs to agent X, and then we're the broker, and we align everything. So I think so in answering this question for you, which is how has COVID changed things? I think what COVID has done is expedited changes that were already in the works. So when you take a look at the agent experience, we were on the forefront of having really nice offices, kind of a differentiating factor. This started, I don't have the exact years, but I'm gonna say we're about 10 years into having really, really nice looking offices. It started in our DC office, and then spread to our corporate office in Ashburn and then Arlington. And I would say of our 13 main offices, 11 or 12 of them are completely up to our standards, and the other two we have in the works. And so why this matters is it provides a great agent work experience, gives the agents an amazing place to meet with their clients. One thing we moved away from was dedicated office space for individual agents. And that is because when you get to be a larger broker like us, you have to be hyper focused on scale. And also within the brokerage industry, especially in a competitive market like the Washington, D.C. area, the amount of commission dollars per sale that we as a brokerage can keep, you have to be really careful of that. So what you don't want to do is invest $1 million opening a brand new office and provide dedicated separate office space for every agent. And then you could find yourself in a situation that, 3-4 months of success in, your office is full. And then what are you going to do? And so what we've done is we focus on creating an amazing agent experience in the office, but everybody has access to a private office through hoteling that they can reserve on our backend system, Access Redwood. So I'm Agent X. I know I'm meeting with a client on Tuesday from uh, 10 to 11. I'm going to go ahead and reserve this room, from 9 a.m. Give me an hour of prep work to 3 o'clock in case it goes really well. So I've got my dedicated, beautiful office space, but it's not my individual office, which makes it infinitely scalable. So why all this matters in terms of COVID is I feel like we were much better equipped to handle the potential changes that are taking place from COVID, such as the demand for office space has completely fallen. The agents, I think of the agents who have kind of reluctantly joined us over the year, joined us because of our culture, joined us because of our training, the amazing advice and tools we can give them, but did so knowing that they were giving up that dedicated office space, and they've never come back and complained about it. And I think what COVID, very long-winded answer here, what COVID has done is probably lessened the importance of dedicated office space for the bulk of agents, right? There's probably, maybe 20% are going to come out of COVID and say, I never want to work from home again. But I venture to guess the feedback I've been getting is there's a large subset that felt like they could never work from home, but because of necessity of that have learned to and now really appreciate it. And there's a lot of efficiencies. Think about it. Just getting changed to going to the office and going to and from, even if you're really close, without thinking, you could easily lose an hour's worth of time. So being able to set up in your home office, I think of some folks from Zillow that I was talking with, early in the pandemic. I want to say they were, like most companies, they probably did work from home, starting in about March. And I'm gonna pinpoint it probably about May is when Zillow came out and said, we're letting people work from home through the end of the year. And my understanding was that wasn't necessarily a crystal ball saying, hey, COVID is still going to be a huge issue in the fall. I think what it was the feedback I heard is they had employees that wanted to make investments in their home office facility. And they were looking for feedback from the company like, hey, I really want to dedicate this room by doing this. But if we're only doing this for another month, I don't really want to kind of spend that money. And so they wanted to give them the green light to be able to do that. So office space, yeah. And then connecting everybody from technology, doing what we're doing right now, feeling comfortable broadcasting on camera, talking to our agents. I don't see that going away. I would say I had this vision of the Peloton experience, prior to COVID, and I'm totally all in with the Peloton experience. First of all, I'm a very happy Peloton customer. I finish almost every ride feeling so much better than I did, going into the ride. Sometimes you're exhausted, but you just have such a better mindset coming off of it. And I normally, when I'm finishing Peloton ride, I always think this is the experience I need to be able to give our agents, where they can get that pep talk right from their home. And because so much of what we do managing growing agents is we have to motivate them to want to push through the sometimes mundane activities that anytime you're in sales are going to partially involve rejection. So the best agents are best equipped to be able to handle rejection and brush themselves off and get back out and get it done. So we strive really hard to be able to deliver that Peloton experience. And this is something really cool we launched with COVID-19 was we do prospecting hour daily. So we started that back in March. I thought to myself, what is the silver lining on this? And I thought, well, everybody's at home. And so at the time, we had no guess that demand was going to go up. We thought that, maybe inventory would go up because people would need the money. But we had no idea demand would go up. And I thought, all right, to offset that demand, agents are going to have to make more calls than ever. And the benefit is because people are working from home, it is much easier for a buyer or seller to take a call at 10 o'clock when they're working from home than it is when they're in an office environment. Think about it, if you're in a cubicle, or in a total open office concept, you can't be talking to a real estate agent in front of a group, at 10 o'clock. But you can do that from the confines of your own home. It's socially acceptable. It's fine. Nobody knows what you're doing. So we found much more engagement, from our agents who are on the phone. And so we do prospect hour from 10 to 11, and we broadcast live into our agent's home. We have a business planning tracker dashboard that's set up. So either my business partner or I, and a special guest today was a loan officer from our affiliated lender, Day One Mortgage. And so we just basically tune in for an hour. We make prospecting calls with them. And then we have a real-time dashboard, and we send shout outs, same way you get a shout out on a Peloton ride, for being on the leaderboard or hitting, your 100th or your 1,000th ride. We give shout outs, at the midway mark and the end. So I know that Sue Pash, she had double digits today. She had 10 conversations. We had a 5-way tie for the most amount of appointments set. So we had 5 people tied with 2. And it's just, that's a way we can engage with people that we wouldn't have been able to, or maybe we wouldn't have felt the pressure to, prior to COVID.
Wow, that's awesome. There's so much in
Awesome.
there.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I think, going back to what you were talking about with scalability and flexibility first, and sort of Hotel Redwood, and giving people choices with office space and where to meet with clients, to everything from then talking about the innovation with the sort of Peloton experience. I mean, it sounds like recapping, choice, flexibility, scalability, motivation, like those things, I'm guessing actually were probably all part of your sort of core DNA before COVID hit. Like, seems like, you just you just ooze that energy anyway. And so when COVID hit, it seems like you had at least a lot of this culture in place already, and it was just looking for those opportunities to add those pieces that really you had already been thinking about and that were already so important to you. And so I'm curious, when you think about innovation, because you're an incredibly innovative person, and a lot of your success, I think, just reading about you and knowing a little bit about who you are from the team, innovation can be this huge new thing that nobody thought of. And it can also be a really small refinement and improvement on something you're already doing. So I guess, how do you view innovation at Redwood? And then what's next for you in terms of what's the next innovation you want to make?
So in terms of innovation, and my views on this have evolved over the years. If you take a look, we were early adapters with websites. I would say we were, first of all, what we did at the very beginning is we learned early through. So I'll go back to my earliest story. I spent my entire $20,000, not before I sold a house, before I generated a single lead. So thank heavens you want to talk about the most stressful months of my life from a business perspective. I saw an account go from 60,000 down to 40,000, which meant all the money I'd put in was gone. And not only had I not sold a house, I hadn't even generated a lead. Not one sorry bastard had called me on the phone to inquire about buying or selling. And I was paying for $1,000 a week ads having me on the back cover. And I was so determined, because our experience was from the builder. I was so determined to take what I learned as a builder rep and apply it to the general brokerage market, that I never took the time to ask an experienced agent how they grew. And that was part of that is, I think, added to our swagger, but it created a lot of stress at the beginning. And so here I am. I'm at to paint the picture, I was at the Pizzeria Uno at the Dulles Town Center having a beer in a private booth, where I'm laying out my ad that history has shown is nobody is going to create nobody to call. And I see a Remax agent at the bar, and I knew him from my builder days, and I thought, this is really humiliating, but I'm gonna go up, I'm gonna ask him, because he advertised in the same paper. I said, hey, how you doing? He said, I don't know if you remember me from Richmond American. I said, we're both in the same paper. And I said, I can't imagine you're having the same lack of success as I am. I said, could you look at my ad and tell me what I'm doing wrong? And he says, oh, yeah. He's like, I see you every week. He says, yeah, easy. Your problem is you don't have any listings. And I said, so if I had listings, you think I'd get phone calls? And he said, oh, hell yeah. Like, you're on the back cover. You'd get a bunch of phone calls. And that's a lesson that if I would have just talked to somebody in the brokerage business, they would have told me from day one. So from that next day, I just went door knocking on every for sale by owner, and I had the full page ad, and I said, hey, Eddie Berenbaum, I have this company. I will advertise you on the back cover of the Loud and Easterner every single week, and I'm not even going to charge you a commission. I said, you'll just have to pay the buyer commission. I said, I need a home to promote. And a lot of people closed the door on my face. And they just thought I was crazy. But this one beautiful family with an incredibly overpriced property, he took me up on my offer. So I put him on the back cover, and I said, I'm going to do an open house every Saturday and every Sunday from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. I'm going to work builder hours. And that got old really fast. But my whole life, my whole business changed doing those open houses. Day one of my open house, I think it was February 3rd, 2003. You could research it. It's sadly the day the space shuttle disaster over Texas. So I found that out as I was putting up my signs. And sad day, nobody came. Day two, though, was gangbusters, and we've never looked back ever since. I'd say within a month, I had probably 10 listings from it, and we've just been growing, growing, growing. So what the hell does this mean in terms of innovation? This is what I'll tell you. We've always innovated based on what worked. And so come 2005, we had I'd say 2004, we launched a website that just kind of redwoodgroup.com. But come 2005, we noticed that the calls from the ads started really, really, really slowing down. And at this point, like, we weren't just in Loud and Easterner, we were in the Loudoun Times Mirror, and we were in the Washington Post every week. And we were our big swagger was, list with us, we'll put you in the Washington Post every week. Well, all of a sudden the phone stopped ringing, and the Washington Post ads were really, really expensive. And it dawned on us that all the people that, because what had happened in middle of 2005 was the inventory started rising. And so people had been going to the Washington Post to try to get ahead of the inventory. And those same people were now less worried about finding the new listing as they were just kind of sorting through and organizing the plethora of homes that were on the market. And that drove us online. And it probably took us, that summer to figure it out. And then come fall of 2005, we were killing it. Those are the beautiful days of internet advertising, because I don't know exactly when Zillow started, but we would get leads from all these companies, and I'd have my BlackBerry, and a lead would come in. We'd send it through Century 21 to lead router software, and I would always it would be cake. I'd copy and paste the address, put that in the subject line, and then just type in, when would you like to see the home? And it was like fishing in a barrel. People would just be like, Tuesday at 3, and you were just getting client after client after client. So that's how we shifted from print advertising to online advertising. And then the next chapter is when things got really, really difficult. So now I'm all in, and that led me to spend probably a year of my life designing a website that I was pretty sure was going to dethrone, the recently appointed Zillow, and be like the ultimate guide for DC area real estate. And that was going to be c2onredwood.com. And it's still our swagger, but I never dethroned Zillow. People told me, so you're asking me about innovation, and I have a lot. I could teach a 400 level class on innovation, both in successes and in difficulties. Now, you fast forward us here. Again, we're redoing our website. We launched a partnership with KV Core in January. And what's really cool, you guys are doing the design of it. You're assisting with the design of it, but we're building it with KV Core's API, which we're pretty excited. It gets us out of the database business and enables us to focus on brokerage. But where I see innovation now is, look, you have to, as a brokerage, you have to respect the fact that inventory is really low. You need to, we don't want to be that, the brokerage that flies in the face of NAR and just goes after, promoting pocket listings and not doing right by our consumers. But you have to recognize that the coming soon elements there. So we are building in a lot of elements that will build out build out automated brochures, automated postcards when coming soons come in, and we work closely with our team to make sure that we abide by the NAR and the Bright MLS rules. But you've got to be able to get that inventory all queued up, and follow an organized process. We also do have a product called Redwood Offers has been a child of mine, and that is all about speeding up the sales process. So when it comes to your bread and butter consumer, typically has a nice presentable house and they've gotten a month or two to have it on the market, and they're okay with showings, inside and outside of COVID. And for that, a normal listing, it makes sense. But there's also consumers that they would say, you know what, I would take a 5 to 6 to 10% haircut just to avoid the whole inconvenience of selling a house. And I think you should have an answer for that. And then you also, in creating an answer for that, you have the effect. I would always say, my dad, every time we'd go on vacation, he was the guy that always pulled over for the store that says 10 t-shirts for $10. Even though in his mind he knows these are going to be nasty t-shirts that I wouldn't want to wear. What if this is the one store that actually has included the good t-shirts with the comfortable fabric, and the ring neck in that shelf? Like, what if the stock boy screwed up and I'm going to get 10 $10 t-shirts for $10? And of course he'd always leave angry, be like, those things had holes in them, that's terrible. But he probably also bought fiddle faddle popcorn on the way out too, so the store won. Point is, you want to be able to spark curiosity to find out who's going to sell, and an easy way to do that is find the people that want to consider an offer. Now you find the people that are likely to sell. So really, if you take a look at Zillow offers, and you take a look at Knock, which has a lot of success down south, Open Door was kind of the leader in that, and then there's OfferPad, a couple more. Really, what that is about is the first online product to identify sellers. Identifying buyers, if you go back to my example, summer 2005, when people stopped calling for our Washington Post ads and started responding to online services, that's about the time that real estate websites figured out, if you want to meet buyers, you just have to have pretty pictures online and see who inquires. And it's really easy. Because of that, there's a gazillion agents, brokers that are playing that game. What Open Door identified for the first time was reliably, if you want to find out who's selling, make it really easy for them to request an offer. And then that's like the akin. So I think that's where the innovation is going to be to continue to service and advance the sale of people that want to sell their house. And I think that there's a lot of room for upside in brokerages, both that can create their own branded solution, but also that tap in to these companies like Open Door and Knock, because they're not going to go away. In the same way that it was naive for me to think that C2 on Redwood.com would knock off Zillow. It's naive for me to think that Redwood Offers would ever knock off, do better than Zillow Offers. I need to be the brokerage that plays best with Zillow Offers and Open Door, and then has our own white labeled and separate solution that we can get a degree of consumers to go through as well. So.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think there's a couple of really good pieces of advice in there for other, broker owners and even agents, which really, one of the things you said early on is innovation is about the successes as much as it is the failures. And so, you could look at something like Redwood Offers and look at the whole iBuyer movement and say, how is this going to be profitable? Or how am I going to compete with a Knock or, with all these other companies? You can look at all the reasons why not. It's less often that we look at all the reasons why to do something. And so it sounds like you really prioritize that too, and taking those chances and taking those risks, but also being smart about it. So I'm curious, because you are a business that needs to make money, and going back to your story of not having very much to begin with and watching it dwindle down. I mean, what data are you looking at? What information
Mm-hmm.
do you need as a president today to know whether your risks are paying off or not? Like, how do you make
Yeah.
that assessment?
So you take so in terms of like how we make money as a brokerage, I'm going to answer that first. So you take a look. Our bread and butter is obviously the agent production. If we don't have producing agents, we don't have a future. So
Mhm.
it is the modern day brokerage. You're so it back in the day you had a lot of mom and pop brokerages. Your mom and pop brokerages are now essentially real estate teams at brokerages like my brokerage or the competitors.
Mhm.
So the if you want to talk about a dying breed, it is that mom and pop brokerage, right? There's two ways to make money in real estate brokerage. One would be a small operator where you do a significant amount of sales yourself or in your own team. Number two would be to get really big and have ancillary services. We figured out a couple years in that was the only two ways to make money, and we were too committed, so we just pushed right forward and grew and now are able to enjoy things with scale and do cool things that other companies can't do and still make money. But you can't rely on the income from individual transactions to just make it as a brokerage, or it's always going to end in heartache. So um, with that in mind, how you can achieve positive return on investment is you have to love the heck out of the agents that you're with and help them sell more houses. Number two, you have to meet with agents who are currently at other brokerages and help them, see the light to come over to your company and grow their business and grow your stature. Number three, you have to have really good ancillary services that not only drive profit to your bottom line, but more importantly, enhance the agent experience. So we partner only with the best title company. That's who we're um, affiliated with, both from an ownership perspective and from a service perspective. And then we recently launched just this March. We did our first closing with Day One Mortgage, which is a joint venture between ourselves and Loan Depot. And Loan Depot is the preeminent technology source. So we're like the true mortgage company of the future in terms of what we were able to pull off with that. So when we take a look at return on investment, you focus on those four, and then you do things that are going to drive revenue into one of those buckets. So did I mention my fourth one, which is lead generation? So when you take a look at lead generation, um, you have to have a budget for failures on there, right? Redwood Offers isn't a failure. It hasn't driven a significant amount of transactions, but it's not a failure because we're constantly learning. And it might be at the end that we might learn, that was a naive idea. I don't think that's going to be the case because we're constantly evolving. What is within Redwood Offers. Tough thing would be consumer leads. When you talk about consumer leads, you have we go back to when I was telling you I was trying to dethrone Zillow. um, what we learned was a couple companies really: Zillow, who now owns Trulia, realtor.com, for and then and let's face it, Redfin. Those guys, gals, companies, whatever you want to call them, they dominate the search. And so Realtor and Zillow command a huge premium for their leads. And so you have to really work in a lot of company dollar on the brokerage side when you distribute those to agents. And that's something that we're constantly tweaking with. So there, when you get into that long-winded way, you have to pay a lot of attention to what is your cost per lead and how long does it take to convert, um, and what is and then so then what's going to be your ROI. So you have to figure online leads are about an 18-month venture, and you're working really hard to get a 2% conversion. So you have to set all of your um, math problems up like that before you start buying online leads and distributing to agents. So it's taken us a really long time to figure that out because 18 months to convert means you look like a loser for a really, really long time before you start seeing the profits from that. And so what you do in the interim of that is you have to pay attention to your funnel. How are your agents? So if I had 1,000 agents or clients, prospects, leads come into the funnel, how many of those are moving through? Which agents are having the most success moving them through? What are those agents doing, and how do I duplicate that? So
Mhm.
that's what we focus on.
Yeah, and all going back to the scalability piece too. I mean, I think
It has,
it clearly the human component is still there, and your origins of wanting to focus on the user experience. And I think you can do that in a scalable way, as you've shown. So I'm curious, Eddie, because I don't want to keep you on
Mhm.
another Zoom call for hours and hours more, even though I can talk to you forever. I think, what it seems like there's nothing stopping you now
Mhm.
um, for
Now
C21.
that we lived through, well, yeah, a couple failed, what is it? A couple failed vaccine trials could kind of stop us all, but aside from that, yeah, I don't think there's anything stopping us now. I think we've learned, there is like and I don't want to be so naive because maybe the vaccine does fail, but absent that, a near death experience, which is what I would say, we never got to a near death experience. But when you take us back to March, you, as a company with 13 offices, and obviously, we have a significant infrastructure to be able to support our 600 agents, you could, it's hard to really visualize a situation where your expenses could stay the same and your revenue could go down to zero, right? That is some scary stuff. And I can only speak for myself. I tend to make really good, clear decisions, when faced with that type of an existential threat. When you're a healthy company humming along, making a profit, you're making it. It becomes really hard to make um, a hard decision and to make significant yet needed changes, because if you're happy with where your income is and your company is largely happy with how things are going, why throw that to chance, even if you know in your core that the changes you're making are going to pay off in time. But nobody's kind of down for that type of a risk. So for me, the innovator with two business partners that are much more attuned, you know, I'm kind of the one that's always curious. Let's make the change and to see what happens, and they're more the like let's not. Why do you want to do that? And so I did get a little more free pass to innovate, because we had to innovate by necessity, staring down potentially months of zero revenue. And then you just close your eyes for a couple weeks. And we started prospecting hour. We started doing company-wide sales meetings, which now seems so normal, doing a company-wide sales meeting where everybody connects on Zoom. But back then it was different. And every week we were meeting and we were expecting, all right, next week the numbers are going to be completely awful. And the numbers kept getting better and better and better. And then it was like really weird. Like, what is happening? Why are people not freaking out? It still does seem weird to me that holy cow. Now you could get into the spread of the virus, and I know there's a bunch of different feelings on that, and not everybody certainly is giving us great marks for how that has gone. But in terms of economic um, you know economic projections, as shown by the stock market, it's pretty amazing that we're in the middle of a pandemic and we keep hitting stock market records, you know um, day after day for the most part. So you could, I'm not banking on that. I have my own feelings on that, but it is, we find ourselves at a really optimistic place in history. I would think normally you would a market would price in the calamity. I know if we ever approach a lender about giving us a loan, they're hyper tuned into what is the worst case scenario, and we say, hey, look, we're going to be 1,000x, return on investment on this, and they're not going to evaluate it on that rosy outlook. They're going to evaluate it on like everything that could go wrong. How are they going to get their money back?
Mhm.
And so we're at a very interestingly optimistic period, I think, in our history, that we're going through all of this. We still have uncertainty, but but the markets are skyrocketing and people are feeling comfortable to move. And I know there's a whole segment of the population that we don't interact with who are in a terrible, much worse and much more uncertain situation. And so I don't talk about this stuff lightly, but in terms of people who are buying and selling houses, the optimism there is definitely inspiring. So
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because when we look at the stock market out there, and right now, what's really driving a lot of the growth, it's the tech companies, and so your comment earlier about sort of complacency and making sure that whether it's those rock bottom moments, and I
mhm,
hope we all don't need rock bottom moments in order to be reminded that, hey, we shouldn't be complacent. And I love that, day one mortgage. I mean, if you look at Jeff
mhm,
Bezos's day one mentality,
mhm,
it's, we'll never get to the stasis of day two. We always need to
mhm,
stay in day one. We need to stay obsessively focused on the customer. We need to stay paranoid, a healthy paranoia.
mhm,
And that's how we're going to continue to see this amazing success. And Amazon is clearly
mhm.
amazingly successful. And so
Yeah.
I love that. I love that, everything you're saying is kind of tying together. And also the optimism is not unrealistic. I think there's still the pragmatism, excuse me, that, yeah, we still need to keep
Mhm.
laser focused. And also, it sounds like you have some really good partners, and some people who you've
Yeah.
surrounded yourself with who complement your strengths and help you avoid that kind of place of complacency.
Yeah. And what's interesting is we entered into this whole thing thinking that we were three guys who more than complemented each other, that really shared the same work ethic. The
Mhm.
original vision for Rockstar Realty, which was the early title that we never intended on keeping, but before we
That's
came up with Redwood, it was Rockstar Realty, was this idea of Nick and I, more than even Sean, had this idea: 6 months on, 6 months off. And so if you work with people that share your work ethic, that you could literally, you could work for 6 months, and then I could hand it off to Nick and he'd work for the other 6 months. So we would imagine, and this is like obviously pre family mentality there. And also you get caught up in the success run,
Mhm.
so then at some point you're like, 6 months became, yeah, 2 months is nice, to like, yeah, what do most companies do, like 3 weeks? But that was the original driver. And then what we realized is, and we were probably 5-10 years into it before we realized this, is that our personalities are actually quite different. And
Mm.
that, I'm a driver, Sean is an I, and then Nick is a C. And so I'm kind of the high D, Sean's on the line between the I and the S, I believe. And then the C, whatever the heck that means, that's what Nick is. It's funny, as I look at those disc profiles, C's are the ones that I can't figure out. So if I'm meeting with someone and I can't figure out what makes them tick, I think, all right, they must be a C, because I just don't understand it. And the more I get to know about Nick, who's the very methodical and the planner, um, is I don't get it. So,
Yeah.
but we give ourselves the freedom to be able to operate, and they put the brakes on some good ideas I have, but they put the brakes on some dumb ideas too. Yeah,
And then sounds like let you run with other
yeah.
ideas. So
They
that's
do, yeah, yeah. Sometimes yeah. So and again, out of the necessity of COVID has and I don't want to say that I've inspired them. It has just given us a reason to move forward on things that we felt good about, but that maybe we got caught up because we didn't want to rock the boat, or you know do other things. You take a look at Redwood Offers. Brad Edmond, like 4 years ago, wanted to quote me because we were talking about that concept, and I took it to Sean and Nick, and they said, no, like, we do not want to be answering those questions with our agents. Our agents hate iBuyers. We understand what you want to do. We don't want to deal with any kind of pushback. And so we kind of put that genie back in the bottle. Brad was nice enough. He still quoted me, but he didn't put my name in it, so we didn't have to deal with a bunch of grief. But it scares people because people think, well, is an iBuyer gonna replace me? As
mhm.
opposed, and that's scary. But if you're worried that somebody might replace you, the better mindset is, how could I work? How could I either make sure this person doesn't replace me. And then if there's such a significant threat, like, all right, if they're going to replace me, why are they going to replace me? And how
Mhm.
could I beat them to replacing me? Or, if the answer is, involves the level of finance that these iBuyers have to operate at, which is just not possible for a brokerage our size.
Mhm.
um how do we partner with them? And so there's I forget what it's called. I real estate pro. I have a designation from there's some guys out west that deal with iBuyers, and so I went through the whole course and kind of learned that way. Even though iBuyers are not in DC, which I'm fine with, when they come to DC, my brokerage is going to be perfectly ready to either get to the consumer first, or partner with them there. So
Yeah. And your team, who, I mean, like most people I think we found this year, are incredibly adaptable. They've adapted.
yeah.
They know they can move on to be that next best thing, not be replaced, and we all continue to move forward. I think there's
Mhm.
so much wisdom here, Eddie. I think
Oh, thank you.
hopefully
Yeah.
people watching this,
Mhm.
you'll get a lot out of this. And if you want to join a really awesome brokerage, I think C21
Mhm.
Redwood is
That's what
definitely
we like.
definitely a top
Yeah.
one. So, Eddie Berenbaum,
Okay.
thank you again for being here. Again, this is Century
Oh
21
yeah.
Redwood
Yeah.
featured today
Thank
on
you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, talking about the future of real estate. Anyone watching this, I'm Rachel Allard with Union Street Media. And if you want to be featured, reach out and let us know too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel.